Dale here. I've got a fantastic author for you guys to visit with today. Dr. Velma Bagby is here, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and her latest work. So go ahead and take it away, Dr. Velma.
Thank you so much for having me, Maddie. I'm Dr. Velma Bagby. I am an author who has only been writing books since 2018. I retired in 2012 and felt the need to write my first book based on the urging of my adult daughters, because we had conversations around this same topic in around that time. And they encouraged me because they shared what we talked about with their friends. They said, "Mom, you really need to write a book." So I wrote that first book on the same topic. But years later, after counseling, providing, I'm an ordained minister as well, certified Christian dating and relationship coach. And after years of coaching single women and helping out with marriage counseling, when couples hit a rough patch, I just began to see this pattern over and over, thinking that some of these issues would not surface had they prepared themselves better. And so that's kind of where this came from. And I was thinking, as I was approaching the writing of this topic, how best to present this. And I thought of the fish, and just happened to call my brother and ask him a question about fish because he's an expert. And he began to describe his favorites, their personalities, what it takes to catch them, what time of the day, what location at the water, what type of bait they prefer. And as he began to describe them, I said, oh, these are the characters I need for the book. So that's how this all came about.
That was awesome. So go ahead and tell the viewers, I was reading her description of her book before we jumped on here, and she does a fantastic way of describing the men as certain fish. So go ahead and tell them about that.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of comments. People have contacted me about the analogy of the fish. So this father decides to figure out a way to help his daughter move away from some of the bad choices she was making in her choice of men. And so he just couldn't figure out what to do. So he prayed about it, and his answer came. And the answer was to use what you know. He's an expert fisherman. Well, we can't say fisherman now, but he's an expert in fishing. And so he comes up with these 5 metaphorical stories. 4 of the stories represent the type of men she recently dated. So the first one is the catfish. A catfish is found deep in the mud at the bottom of any body of water. They love garbage. They will not chase after a bait. They will not go after anything. They just sit there and wait for dead things to float by. They eat dead, smelly, just rotten things. So they're called garbage fish or bottom feeders for a reason. Mm-hmm. And then there's the salmon. The salmon is the type of fish who does not like to get caught. He avoids getting caught. And when he does get caught, which means that represents a person who doesn't like to commit. So they're balancing multiple women all at the same time. He will fight and even break the fish line, running away if you catch him. And so fishermen or fishers hate the salmon for that reason. Then there's the sturgeon. The sturgeon is the type of fish who's sneaky and likes to nibble. Those kind of guys who are also non-committal, but likes tasting and leaving. I call them the grab and go, because when you're fishing for a sturgeon, those who are fishing for them find that they can sit there all day thinking their line is full of bait, that the fish just has not bite, there's no bite yet. And so they don't realize that the sturgeon has already nibbled off the bait. They're sneaky in the way that they slowly nibble so that the fisher does not know that the line is being nibbled on. And then the last one is the puffer fish. And the puffer fish likes hanging out on the edges of the rivers and things because it's very territorial, but it's beautiful. It's described as the only fish that's known that has a human-like face, human-like eyes. It's beautiful and captivating until you agitate it and make it mad. Then it puffs up 3 times its size, and then it has these spines sticking out of its body that's very poisonous, and there's no antidote to that poison. If it sticks, it pricks you. So those are the kind of men that the father has watched his daughter dating. And so he wants her to avoid that. The fish that he hopes that she will eventually capture is the goldfish. That's the catch that no one wants, because she had this vision of the type of guy she wanted. So she was dismissing this one person that had been around her all her life. She just thought he didn't have the look she wanted. He didn't have the type of job she wanted. And so she just ignored him. And her father had to show her how to look for characteristics that matter and not the characteristics that are temporary conditions, because he explained to her conditions can change. I'm not the Coke bottle I was when I got married, and I've been married 49 years. My husband had a beautiful head of hair. That hair is all gone now. So when you focus on conditions, you're focusing on things that will change eventually. And so he wanted to teach his daughter to focus on characteristics that matter so that she can build a lifetime with this person.
I love that, because there are so many women out there that actually need a book like this. And I kind of wish I had had that when I was younger. It reminds me of the small groups and stuff we would get together. We had a book, I think it was called Lady in Waiting. I'm not sure, not 100% sure. It's been a while, but this one, I love the descriptions because I feel like it's more relatable and realistic. And it's just hilarious because also the goldfish, I'm like, oh, you've got the goldfish, but it's gold, like this is the best prize because it's a gold thing. And
yeah, because even in the book, she questioned her dad when he showed her the goldfish in the lake. He said, what type of fish is this? And he asked her, and she said, well, I don't know, Dad. He said, those are goldfish. She said, that large? He said, when you put the goldfish in a larger container, they'll grow.
Yeah.
And so that was the point of meeting someone that you might help to grow. Rather than judging them where they are at that point. She wanted to make sure, because she was successful, she was a millennial, she had achieved her college degree, she was successful in her career, and so she measured that and used those tools to measure a guy, and that's not necessarily the tools you want, because conditions, again, can change, it could flip. She's the one without the job, but he's the one that's being successful, so any of those things can change, and that's what her father was telling her.
Yeah. So with writing this book, what did you find was your biggest challenge?
I think my biggest challenge was timelines. Aside from timelines, it was writing the story of the pufferfish, because of, like I said, I counseled for over 30 years, and I've seen some very tragic experiences. And I think that's what was driving me to write it, because I was tired of watching on the news, hearing the stories, and even the ones I personally heard and know of, that those mistakes were causing a lot of harm. And I just wanted to write a book so that it came across in a way that it was easy for a person to understand, but not intimidating. And I just wanted to be able to tell the stories in a way that will, draw people in. So the hardest story for me was the pufferfish, because it deals with abusive situations. And we see a lot of tragic news about that.
Sure.
And I felt that was the heart for me of all of the fish, because there were so many bad stories. The story of the child being placed in the oven to keep the man from hitting the toddler, that's what woke the wife up and made her decide to leave. Now, she was receiving this kind of treatment all this time until she had this child, and she saw her husband raise his hand towards that toddler. That is what caused her to leave. But I'm just saying that these are situations I hope by women reading the stories, it would help them to avoid, by asking the right questions and really scrutinizing the guys that they make the decision to make a lifelong life with.
Yeah. So with the world that you've got the characters in the story taking place in, where did the inspiration come from that? Because I know you're tying in the fishing and stuff, but did you draw from somewhere you've been personally to put that story into play at?
Well, I remember when I wrote the first book, like I mentioned, it was based on conversations my adult daughters and I had about men. Their first question was, Mom, why are men so slow? And so the title of the book says, your Adam is asleep until God opens his eyes. His eyes have to open to you. So when I was interviewed, I remember the interviewer asked me, do you plan to write a book with the male perspective? And I said, yes, I do. And so I tried to make sure that in this book, we get to see what the father's role used to be. We don't have that anymore. It's kind of, the family unit has somewhat torn down because men are not always present in the home. And then sometimes men are present, but don't know this role, don't know this side of their role. And that role is to ensure that whoever is interested in your daughter, that they help you to vet them properly. And so with that, I created what I call a wise counsel, because a wise counsel used to be kind of that old grandma or that aunt that you can go to and just kind of share your girly stories with and get some wise perspective on what should be next. We just don't have that anymore, which is why we have so many coaches now. We have to have people to go to. And so in the story, we talk about gathering a group of people, 1 or 2 or 3 of folks that you trust, whose perspective will be helpful to you when you're making those choices in men, because it's not healthy to date in secret, because you're the only one that's there vetting this person and your heart is too close to the situation. So you need people whose hearts are not involved, but can really see this guy for who he really is. And in some of the stories, that's exactly what happened. I think in the story of the salmon, the young lady Shanta, who was dating the salmon, her friends saw some red flags about this guy and encouraged her to let go, pursuing him or allowing him to pursue her. And she found out later why. I'm not going to tell a spoiler, but she found out why it was good to have such a good group of friends.
That's good, because even a good group of friends sometimes it's hard to find too. So having a group in general like that, and that's where you said like the coaching has come in too.
Yeah.
So, and you're a marriage counselor, or you were a marriage counselor. How did
as an ordained minister, we're trained to provide singles counseling and marriage counseling. Sometimes it's together with my husband, because I'm married to a pastor. Sometimes it's together, sometimes I'm by myself. But eventually, after the first book, I decided to just go ahead and get my certification as a Christian dating and marriage coach. And from there, I said, okay, let me begin to write the kind of books that I think people need out there. And so far, some of the women are contacting me and saying, I met every last one of those guys you mentioned in your books. Now I need my goldfish.
I can even think of some that like fit those descriptions too, like that I've dated in the past. And it's hilarious, like, because you have to step away from it to realize it's like that.
Absolutely.
Have you found yourself using the stories of all the fish with some of the people you've had to sit down and talk with since you wrote the book?
Yes, I had to actually have a conversation with someone who reached out to me, was having a tough time, and was going through something really devastating to her. And that's what we sat and talked about. And it was this book that drew her attention to what she was facing. And so we talked it through, because, there are things that even those who are already in a marriage relationship can benefit from, because in the book, some of the tools that the father gives the daughter, he encourages her to practice it even before she meets the one that she's going to marry. Because a lot of what we do as women, just because we practice certain things before we're married, doesn't mean it stops. It's work. And so work before marriage, continues after marriage. And so that's something I like to continue to promote. So yes, women have already reached out to me and I've had conversations with a few.
That is awesome. And do you feel like, if, say, in the girl's perspective, what if it was a husband looking for a wife? Could it be like, could you reverse it and put like the future husband in the girl's shoes and him looking for a partner as like the fish?
Well, you are talking about my next book. It's called the Wives Who Tear Down the House. And these are based on guys who, again, they also make the same mistake. They make decisions based on things they see on the surface and have no idea the wickedness of some of these women and their hearts. And it's based on a proverb Proverbs 14:1, which says, a wise woman builds her house, but a foolish woman tears it down, which means that she's ill-equipped to manage a home, the children, anything related to home life. She's ill-equipped to do it. And matter of fact, rather than helping him build, these women in the book are tearing it down.
That sucks. And that's awesome
Yeah.
that you're writing that in that perspective. That was one of the things I was like, could this be reversed? Like, because I've got
Yes.
people in my brain that I'm like, oh, they need to check this out. Like, it's probably terrible. I won't name any of them
It
on
sure
here,
could
but
be.
yeah. So I'm
You're
just like,
right.
like that would be good for them. So as an
Absolutely.
author, you've got a couple of books out, you've got a busy life. How do you balance finding time to write with everything else?
Well, my favorite time to write is 4:30 a.m. in the morning. So that's around the time my husband rises. It's quiet in my house. It's quiet outside, because I'm not that far from a freeway and I can hear the traffic sometimes. So I find that's more peaceful for me. My mind is clear and I'm not tired. And so I find a lot of energy early in the morning, and that's my best writing time. I try to set time for writing on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. I try to leave my weekends free for family because, again, I'm married to a pastor, and so Sundays are busy. Weekends, I try to grab time with my grandchildren. I have 3. And sometimes during the week when I can grab some early walking time, we'll get out together and go by the water and walk a little bit. They love that. So I try to set specific days and stick to that. And then I set my goal based on how many characters I want to write each of those 3 days. And if I go over, I'm fine. If I'm under, I'm fine too. But at least I have a goal each of those 3 days.
That's an awesome schedule. I like it. So do you have a form of self-care that you follow, keep as a routine as well with on top of the writing and everything?
Well, definitely. I just recently lost a little weight, so I've been working on that. And I remember in February, what delayed the release of my book, the original release date was in March 2022, but I had 4 family members to pass away. And one of them was my stepmom that I lived with during the summers with her and my dad when I was just a preteen. So fond memories, that was the hardest one that touched me. The others were cousins, and I found that as I was doing the final edits of the manuscript, when I got it back from the editor, I wasn't taking a break. And I remember beginning to lose sleep, and my daughter prayed with me one morning, and I realized then what I was doing. I did not take time out for my own self-care to move through the grieving process.
Yeah.
And so I said, what's the point? The manuscript is done. The book is done. There's no rush. So I delayed the release until April to give myself time for that self-care, like you said. And all I did was the walking by the water, taking my time resting, watching my favorite movies, which is something my husband and I love to do. We love Friday movies, that kind of thing. So I took more time to just do that so that I wouldn't get sick myself, just not slowing down. So in my schedule, that was the whole idea of just purposely setting 3 days a week to write. Now, there are times when I have a lull on Saturdays because my husband works Saturdays, then I might have time to write. I'll do it if that's what I do. But sometimes I make myself get out and go and visit grandchildren and things like that. So those things are important.
Yes, I really like that because that's self-care is important in general. Like, and I like to really touch on that whenever I talk with authors, because a lot of people who aren't authors, they go to creative stuff as their outlet. But since we do creative work, like as part of income, it's different. So
sometimes I want to be silly. Sometimes I just want to laugh.
Yes.
And when I'm with my 3-year-old grandson and my 8-year-old granddaughter, that's exactly what I'm going to get. I love how he loves me. Come on, he calls me Nanny. Can't say Granny yet. Come on, Nanny. And just hearing that and sweet little voice going outside, it's nothing but in the backyard with him, with his play structures. It's just a joy.
Yes. Children, I love it. I have a little boy, a 4-year-old, and it's a whole nother world having kids involved. And their laughter is contagious.
It is.
Instantly makes you smile. So
yeah,
so with these 2 books, you've reached a lot of people so far, and you're working on another book, which is kind of in the opposite sex's view. Sorry, I was like trying to make it.
Which is based on what men experience.
Yes. And
Yes.
do you have an idea when you want to release that? I don't say like a specific date, just like an idea.
No, I was thinking I was going to work on releasing it in the fall, but
Mhm.
I've got to pause because as I began to go through the interview process with different podcasters, a couple of things resonated with me. One, I had in the back of my mind conducting workshops and just having more vocal conversations around these topics.
Mhm.
That was one. And the other thing is someone asked me if I plan to write more about the catch. And I said, that's a good idea because I
Yeah.
do have other fish in mind. I said, now it may not become a book, but it may just become a Kindle version
Yeah.
of each one, writing about a different fish, a story in each of the Kindle versions. So
Mhm.
I said, that's absolutely, and so that is the one that feels like that's going to be next. And so even though I have an idea of projects I'd like to work on and topics, where they fit and how soon they're going to be worked on and released has to do with how I'm feeling and how I'm led. I usually pray first and wait for leading. And when I heard that, I said, okay, sounds like I'm going to be writing more about fish.
Nice. That is
I think that's
awesome.
coming. Mhm.
Because that'll be really cool to see how you like relate it more to different types of people. I'm excited
Absolutely.
for that because that's going to be
Yes.
really, really cool. Because some of them
But
don't exactly fit into like the molds there, but
yeah,
they have similarities that you see in some of the various parts. That's going to be
well,
really cool.
Grayson, the father, does mention the spool of fish, and I thought that might become one because everybody sees that when you go to an aquarium, you see this spool of fish. One turns left, they all turn left. One turns right.
Yep.
And in the book, he talks about online dating is a spool
Oh
of
man.
fish.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, that's going to be one.
That's cool. I like it.
Mhm.
So, if you could give advice to a new author or someone that's just starting their writing journey, what would you tell them?
Everything about this journey is about relationships. So it's not just about writing. So I would encourage them to make sure they first determine what genre they're interested in writing in and connect with those kind of authors. Either read some of their books, connect with them by subscribing to their blogs, because many of the authors also include helpful advice on writing in their blogs so you can get some tips and tools. But the other thing would be to read as many how-to guides as you can because it's out there. Help is out there. You don't, I see a lot of questions on Facebook. How do I do this? How do I start? I want to write. There's a host of books and tools out there that you can just simply add to your Kindle or
Mhm.
your iPad and read it yourself and then take your time in the process. Understanding your genre, understanding what's required because there are rules attached to the type of book you're writing, and also connecting with other authors because you need a tribe around you in this process. It's not an isolated experience. You just need support along the way.
Awesome. That is great advice. Well, Dr. Velma, thank you so much for hanging out with me on the show today.
Of course, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.